The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get Stinko.
Time to play the game. Time to play the game.
Here's Ennis with a shot on goal. Alabek to save. Ennis gets its own rebound. He scores, and I think Charlie Coyle tipped it in front.
It's all about the game and how you play it. All about control, and if you can take it.
Entering pass in front of the Wild net. Cleared from difficulty that time by Quincy. Back the other way. Here's Stahl. Stahl for Coyle. He scores! What a pretty goal. Eric Stahl, Charlie Coyle. Coyle down the right wing. Goes up and under the crossbar on the short side. It's 2-0. Minnesota gets a fortuitous bounce as it comes over to Charlie Coyle. Coyle ahead now. Gets it back for Spurgeon. A drive on goal. Rebound Stahl. He shoots. He scores.
Trying to figure out what my move's gonna be. Come on over, sucker, why don't you ask me? Don't you forget there's a price you can pay. Cause I am the game and I want to play.
That was quick.
Welcome, Giles and the Goalies podcast.
We already got Tom giggling like half a second into the podcast.
So much for the suspense of
Any kind of introduction whatsoever, yeah.
That's all right. Nobody's listening anyway.
After last week.
Yeah. We tried to get off to a good start this year, and
0 for 2.
It had the equivalent of the scene in D2 where the Hawks guys just trip right over the wire.
Right, pretty much.
Yeah, they thought they were doing good. No
Nope.
chance. Hey, welcome to the Giles and the Goalie podcast, presented by Pick and Shovelware. I am your host, or try to be your host, Giles Farrell. Across the table for me is Ben Remington.
Hello.
And we have a pair of guests with us this week as we preview the Minnesota Wild season. As you no doubt heard from hysterical laughing, we have zone coverage commander-in-chief Tom Schreier.
It's a scary thought. Can we call you the zone father?
I'm fine with that.
Well,
That's
I'd rather
good.
call you the commander-in-chief than another commander-in-chief.
Well,
so.
yeah, that's a term you don't want to throw around these days.
My podcasters.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus.
We're decent people. Good Lord.
And next to Tom, probably for not much longer, is the fourth person of the zone coverage Wild team, Heather Rule.
I'm just here for the Tom giggles, I guess, and Friends references.
Right, of course,
they
always.
come up. Good start, guys.
Yeah.
Good start.
That's the
Off
most
to
I've
a
seen Heather
blazing
laugh.
start.
like literally, we got 2 solid minutes there.
Heather and Tom are fresh from Target Field, where the Twins closed out their regular season.
Mm-hmm.
Now on to the postseason. How about that? The Twins are in the postseason. Quick go around the table since we're going to be making predictions all show. Ben, I'm going to throw it to you first. Who wins on Tuesday?
You know what? I think the Twins do win on Tuesday. I'm not predicting, World Series and all that jazz, but the few things that carry over from the regular season to the postseason are pitching and defense. And while the Twins don't have a lot of depth of pitching, Irvin Santana has been very good. And their defense, obviously, nothing falls but raindrops. So I feel like they can actually beat the Yankees in New York, and Minnesota will cave in upon itself.
Tom?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to beat New York in New York. It's a one-game playoff. Anything can happen in one game, but I think we saw something similar in that first game, in the Bronx. And I know they beat them twice in Minnesota, but the offense would really have to carry them, I would think, and they didn't in that first game.
Heather?
I'm actually going with the optimism here of the fact that it's just one game and not a full series where you have to win more than one game. So I'm kind of taking that stance on it. They did get to the Yankees ace in New York a couple weeks ago before they ended up losing 11-3, but they did get to him early on, so it can be done. And I do think the combination of having Santana on the mound, and then they also saved Barrios in the rotation here this weekend, so he would be available out of the bullpen too.
Sure.
So I think they have a shot.
I want to believe.
It's guarded optimism too. I mean, I would not be surprised if it went the other way. That's just the way it goes.
Let me tell you the story of the last time I believed. The scene was spring of 2017. And Giles was so entrenched with a team called the Washington Capitals. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's your fault.
No, the Twins, it's going to go the most soul-crushing way possible.
Yeah, pretty much.
They're going to lead it into the ninth, and then Matt Belisle is on to close. And then it's going to be like Brett Gardner or somebody just hit a walk-off dinger.
Mm-hmm.
So the
it's
Twins will lose.
Minnesota sports.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. And then I'll watch Twins Twitter blow up on themselves because they're trying to decide if the Twins did the right thing at the trade deadline.
Yeah, you could debate that for centuries and it wouldn't really matter.
Anyway, on to hockey. Or do we even want to try?
A much more cheery topic. Yeah, of course. Let's go with that.
The Minnesota Wild closed out the preseason this past weekend. They did it Saturday, and they defeated the Dallas Stars 5-1.
Yes.
Something like that at XL Energy Center. And the Wild lost just a pair of times this preseason, and I think, as Michael Russo pointed out, that was really only because they were fielding their B squad, essentially.
Yeah, they're both away games in Winnipeg and Colorado, and they sent basically like 3 NHL players to both of those games, so it's really not all that surprising.
Before we dive into the regular season outlooks, any thoughts on the preseason as a whole?
Well, as with any preseason, you want to have some good signs. You want to have everyone healthy. I feel like they have the good signs. I feel like a lot of guys played well that you'd want to play well. The Parise thing was an issue before preseason, so it's not like he got hurt during it. So for the most part, nobody got hurt during preseason, so that's a positive. And, you got some really strong camp performances out of some guys who probably won't even make the team, like Carson Soucy and Luke Kunin. We'll see. It's preseason, so you don't want to put any stock into it. And Parise is hurt, but at least it wasn't because of those dastardly preseason games.
Yeah, I think that's it. If you can get through it healthy, it's a success. I think, is it Kunin or Kunin? Do we know?
Yeah, it's Kunin. I think I pronounced it wrong.
And he's 19, right?
Yeah.
There was this stat on Twitter I saw that he's actually technically younger than the Wild because the Wild were
5 months
brought up 97.
Yeah, Dan Myers tweeted that last night.
Yeah,
Yeah, he was all over that with I think he brought up Titanic and what was it, the number one song or something was the Candle in the Wind, the Princess Diana version.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
So he had all the stats covered on that.
So very, it's exciting to see that. I mean, I guess the depth there. I will say, I think it only matters if we saw chemistry or they figured out kind of the lines, because I think the young players will carry this, not the Cunnins, but Zuckers and
the Ninos,
Niederreiter.
the Coyles, yeah.
So if you found chemistry there, that's a positive. I think the problem is the overriding shadow is Parise and his back. He was not injured in the preseason, but this is an issue.
Right.
That's the story for me too. Is Parise, and I kind of look at preseason the same way I do with spring training a little bit. It just, it doesn't matter so much the results and everything. So I kind of just, pay attention with a grain of salt a little bit. But, once hearing that Parise is hurt and he wasn't able to, play during the preseason, that's an issue, and it's concerning with, the huge contract and the issues he's had in the past. I think that's the story going into the season as far as health concerns. And, you're right. It is a good thing that no one, they're not all banged up from the preseason. They don't have a bunch of other guys that went down with injuries. I think some guys missed, games here and there maybe, but it's not a big deal. It's obviously you want to be overcautious, and there's no reason to play them in the preseason if they're a little banged up or tweak something like that. That's pretty minor.
Ryan Malone scored a shootout goal in the preseason, right?
Yeah.
What is the collective opinion on Mr. Malone? St. Cloud State, right?
He was already released. So.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
And what was his, what purpose did he serve? Was this literally just him warming up for the Olympics?
Well, it was just a PTO. Yeah, I mean that's what he said when he signed or when he took the PTO. I don't know. I guess that was, I'm sure he wanted to make the team, and I guess he's going to.
I think he was impressive for 38 and 3 years out of the league or something.
And I think he, if I'm not mistaken, he did go to Iowa camp, so I think he is trying to make the Iowa Wild. But again, it'd be as a very, very emergency depth piece kind of thing, and I don't even know he's the first call up.
I mean, the only thing is if a guy like Cunnin needs someone to be like, hey, what is the the NHL experience like?
Yeah.
Maybe there may be some storytelling element.
There's some value to that.
Also, if you want that guy, I can think of a man who tweeted out a picture of his cat drinking from a bottle of hard alcohol and sitting in a bed of 20s. Covered in 20s that maybe could help out with that and maybe could help your NHL team.
Yeah, but I think as much as everyone would love for the Wild to sign Jágr, I think his price tag is still a little higher than they can afford. I don't think he's going to sign for like $4 million a year or something like he made last year. But I think even $1 million a year is maybe a little rich for the Wild's blood right now.
He just needs to be in the league.
He's supposedly talking to 3 teams. So, and I mean, come on, he's gonna sign somewhere.
You have to. He's 46, 47,
or he could play it perfect, like I said in my article about him a couple weeks ago, and wait till after the Olympics. That way he can get to play for the Olympics.
Not a bad idea.
Not a bad idea. Yeah, I mean, get a prorated contract. After that, you play half the season. You get to handpick whichever team you want to sign with.
Can you imagine a Malone Jágr line? Put Cullen in the middle.
Cullen. The collective age is like 125.
Ye old Penguins line.
And they'll score some highlight goals. And, make the youngsters feel all bad about themselves when they're in a slump.
All right, that can wrap up our preseason thoughts.
Sure.
We can end the Ryan Malone era as quickly as it started. So the Minnesota Wild play real hockey games this week, beginning on Thursday when they play at Detroit and open new Little Caesars Arena.
Was this schedule determined before they knew they were getting the arena? Do we know?
No. It was after.
Why is this what Detroit wants? Wouldn't you want Chicago or Montreal or
I don't know.
An original? I mean, it's cool that they're literally this new downtown arena that they get to play in it.
I don't think teams get a say in the matter because then that turns into a weird,
I was gonna say,
corrupt mess.
Let me tell you, Tom, about this organization called the NHL.
So great.
They get in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
They never do the right thing.
Right.
And they just always leave you wanting more.
Did any of you guys go to the old Joe?
I did.
Yeah,
last year.
I saw a random Ducks Detroit game, and it was cool, but it literally was just a giant bowl. Yeah. There was no structure to it in terms of here's the luxury boxes and here's the upper deck. So it was cool. I'm very curious what this one looks like because I'm assuming this has to be one of the most pressured situations for someone designing an arena. You're following up if not the most iconic, the iconic arena.
My favorite part of going to the Joe last year was we literally had our seats in the last row of the upper deck, which allowed me to stand behind our seats because they have a little open space.
Yeah.
So in essence, I was able to see way more of the ice than if I had actually been sitting down because the person in front of you covers up.
Yeah, the seats were meant for
offensive
little
zone.
people. Yeah. Like people must, it's like Fenway. People say, there's not enough space. We luckily had 40 people from Lansing that came in on a bus and were trashed. And so they just kept on buying us beer and food and stuff. And we were like, man, this is, he'll miss the old Joe.
You get the full Detroit experience.
So it was a fun experience for you.
It was amazing. It was amazing.
That was also how I took in my Joe experience.
Really?
Yeah, we're all shocked by this.
Let me tell you about this random guy I was watching a game with during the third period. He was probably more blitzed than I was.
Wow.
Which is saying something.
Hard to believe.
Probably near-death experience for him.
Yeah.
He had his stomach pumped after the game. Yeah.
He probably didn't live too much longer after that. So after the game on Thursday against Detroit, which you can see on NBC Sports Network.
Oh, that's right.
The Wild play Saturday at Carolina, which I know everybody has circled on their calendar.
Woo!
Aren't the Hurricanes supposed to be a little better?
Yeah,
Yeah,
They'll
it's
be
relatively
a
speaking.
bubble team in the East. They might be. They might get in.
I think Scott Darling is the be all end all for them now. I mean, they've finally got competent goaltending. So if he's as good as he was last year for Chicago, yeah, I think they are a bubble team.
On my piece this last week on the Devin Dubnyk contract, of the goalies that signed at least a 4-year deal with at least $4 million AAV, Devin Dubnyk had the second lowest, and Scott Darling, I believe, had the lowest, and it wasn't by a whole lot.
Yeah.
And
he was
incredible.
He was a career backup to that point, but he just had incredible numbers as a backup. So it's kind of understandable why he didn't get a monster contract.
Can I point something out here? This will lead into your point you're making here.
Sure.
So they have Red Wings, Hurricanes, Blackhawks, Blue Jackets, Jets. Which one doesn't fit? And this is Jackets in Minnesota. Which one of these teams, which one of these locations doesn't really make sense?
Yeah.
I don't get how they do the scheduling. But.
Tom.
I'm just really excited about the fact that you have your first 2 games, a full 4 days off.
Yes,
And then,
what is
It gets
this?
better.
then you have a game. Then they're in Chicago. Then finally on the 14th they have the home opener, and then 5 days off.
Also,
which didn't they do this last
This is every year.
too?
Yeah.
No,
every year.
I think they use the same template every season. For the last 5 seasons, the Wild have done this. It's ridiculous.
It's so annoying because then in January, February, you end up with back-to-back games.
Yeah,
all
March
the
you
time.
play 20 games in March.
And then that's when you might need some days off because guys are maybe banged up and hurt. And let's get people excited about hockey in October by giving you 1 game, waiting a week and a half for your opener, and then we'll give you a bunch of days off. So
I promise there's people that will think the season starts on October 24th. Because no one cares about the Blue Jackets.
No kidding.
It's the worst team to start out with.
Nobody wants to go to the home opener.
Yeah, no,
Nobody.
and
It's a Saturday.
yeah, and I think that to your point, I think they're playing. There isn't really a marquee matchup in those first couple of weeks there, so it's really tough to kind of gauge this team when they're playing once every 5 days and they're not playing very many big name teams at all.
Yeah, and then they go on a stretch where they're at home, through end of August.
and plus too, if you go with the argument of Minnesota fans and what else is going on and the sports saturated Twin Cities that we have,
Maybe that's a good thing.
There's potential for the Twins, to be in the postseason. You have the Vikings season going on, Gopher football. So there's that whole thing too. Just the Wild.
Don't worry, all of those will be over soon. Don't worry, they'll be over.
Right.
They'll be over before the end of October.
And the thing is, people want to be they're hungry for hockey. They're going to want to be at this game. It's just, I think they're going to show up and be like, right, it's the Blue Jackets. Like, what the hell? Also, among teams that should have changed their jerseys, isn't the Blue Jackets one of them?
Yeah.
We've
The
already.
Jets, don't the Jets have cool jerseys that they just don't wear enough?
Well, the retro ones are amazing.
Yeah.
They just don't wear them.
And the Canucks, Canucks is 1A for me, not 1A. I mean, 1 alone. For teams that really could just use an overhaul. But
Tom, we do jerseys later in the podcast.
I know, I understand this. I'm previewing the season, and this is upsetting me.
Bad jersey matchups across the board to start the season.
I'm just saying, it's not kicking off
Tom
well.
Schreier's article.
Tom's column. So I guess as we enter the regular season, what is your big headline to open the season? I'll toss this to Heather since Ben gave me a very concerned look.
To open the season, I'm just wondering how much fans are still thinking about last spring and the playoff exit to Mike Yeo and the Blues. And I'm just wondering because you come off this great regular season, which is hilarious, apparently. You come up, you have Bruce Boudreau as a coach, you have this great regular season, you have all these guys that had great years individually, and then you're out in the first round, you can't score in the playoffs. 5 years in the playoffs haven't really done anything. I'm just wondering how much fans are going to remember that, or if it's just turning the page for them and it's a new year and they're just ready to watch hockey again. So that's one thing on my mind. And then, like I said, the whole Parise thing is definitely a concern. And I am wondering about a little bit of a letdown, too, in the regular season. Just as I was going through and looking at some of the stats in the media guide for some of the players earlier today, it's just seeing how many players set, career highs last year in goals, in points, in shots, plus minus, whatever it was, which makes sense when you collectively as a team have a great season. So I'm concerned about that because it just everyone, are they going to be able to play at that level again or even better? Or are there some guys that are going to maybe, slide back a little bit?
Heather, we don't cite plus minus on this podcast.
All right, that's fine.
No, I was going to say, so the reason
I don't have any specifics or anything.
Yeah.
The reason Tom and I chuckled early on was because you used the trigger word for Tom, which was Mike Yo.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It was such a Minnesota sports moment when you lose to the old coach.
Yeah.
And really just had a goalie,
I was trying to put on like the fans' perspective.
I know completely. You're
like,
completely right.
Yeah.
You're completely right.
I mean, it was a big deal last spring, and I'm just it'll be interesting to see if people still care about that or if it's just it's a new year, whatever.
I think the most important thing you said is just kind of all these guys having a career year. Like they're getting beyond just the prospect stage or they're young, right? This is when they're supposed to be good.
They're getting contracts.
And right, exactly. And so obviously the expansion will make your team worse. I think they did as well as they could, given the parameters of a new team entering. And, you didn't lose, I guess, I would lose Tuck and Hollow over a lot of the young players that were on this roster. But yeah, I mean, I think Eric Stahl, no one's talking about this, had a very scary injury to end the season. Yeah. And how does he do as he was age 32 last year? How does he do as he gets into his 30s?
Right.
Granlund seems like the one that might take a step back. I think we saw him shoot a little bit more. He had 26 goals last year. But
69 points.
69 points. Very nice and very important. And then, it's what's the goal total for Zucker, Coyle? Can Niederreiter become that go-to scorer that they need? And I feel like that's if you want something very micro, how did they do in those first 5 away games before you get into, all these home games? If you want something macro, do these young players live up to expectation when Zach Parise has a huge cap hit and might not play very well or might not play as many games as he wants to? And I think that's where do you get that scoring from and who becomes a go-to scorer? What becomes the go-to line for the Minnesota Wild?
Yeah, and more to Heather's point about the losing last season, everyone called for changes, and we got them. Granted, on a lower level, there wasn't burning it down, and the core of this team is very much still intact. But there was changes. I mean, all the people that wanted the pitchfork mob that wanted to run Jason Pominville out of town got their wish, and they also dealt a defenseman for some forwards, something that we've been begging them to do for a couple of seasons now. Granted, it wasn't exactly who we wanted in return, but so there was changes, and I think that's the story for me is that this team didn't quite live up to expectations yet again in the playoffs, and everyone's going to cite that over and over and over again. And they didn't get rid of Koivu. They can't possibly get rid of Parise and Suter, but they made changes.
Not only did they not get rid of Koivu, they signed him for 2 more years.
Oh yeah, no, and that's what I mean. But that's part of that's another pitchfork mob that's completely different. But and
we got many.
There's a couple. There's factions.
The mobs are many.
Yeah, they're decent people though, Tom. But. But
very fine people. Very fine people.
Anyway. off the rails. Lost my train of thought. You just Giles'd me right there is what you did.
Yes. How the tables have turned.
Yeah, I think there was something along the lines of Koivu and there weren't as many changes as maybe people wanted to see, but there were changes.
Yeah.
And the problem is this Foligno guy seems like just kind of like a bad Pominville or whatever. I don't know.
Not even that.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like a good deal.
He's like he's a maybe slightly better Stewart
he's
if
a
anything,
poor man's Pominville.
Yeah, and I think it was, you guys talked about them, forgetting the playoffs or forgetting the failures of last year. I think people will. Until they lose in the playoffs again. And then that's all they're going to talk about because that's what happens every season, right? Like everyone's like, oh, this team is good, blah, blah, blah. Oh, there's a swoon, imagine that. And then they get into the playoffs and it's like, all right, it's a new playoffs, and they lose in the playoffs and like, oh, every damn year, and that's exactly what the attitude is.
Wow, we have a tremor here.
Well,
my. What happened?
I think it's the springs here. But Yeah, the comparison I make with this team, and it's tough because going hockey to basketball, you lose some people, but it's like the Flip Sounders Wolves. When Kevin Garnett was at his best, they were in the playoffs and lost in the first round for years on end.
Right.
And I think without a go-to scorer, without a legitimate superstar, it is really hard. I mean, there is a randomness to hockey, and once you're in, you're in. And I think it's good that this team no longer is just happy to be in the playoffs. These are players that want to progress beyond.
Good isn't good enough, Tom.
Good is not good enough. You got to love that slogan. But anyways, the point being is, if you're there enough and the players aren't threatened by the bright lights and all the pressure, it's a good thing. But it does seem like a team that will maybe beat the expectations of people that don't think they'll be in the playoffs, but probably will go out in the second round again. I mean, that's really kind of forecasting from game one on. This seems like where they're headed.
Well, my next thing on my notes here is kind of predictions for the Wild this year. So I guess that's a perfect segue onto how they will finish. And I will kind of jump on this first as I took part in the Hockey Wilderness kind of season preview podcast earlier today. Check for that this week. But on the show, I said that the Wild will finish with, I believe it was 108 points to win the Central Division, but they draw the Chicago Blackhawks in round one of the Stanley Cup playoffs
really
and go
correct.
right out.
Sounds really correct.
Cruel.
I'm 2 for 2 in Minnesota sports cruelty predictions here today.
Well, yeah.
So before we get into predictions, just real briefly, where do you think they stand in the conference? Because I think this will affect where we put the team with all these numbers.
I didn't even think about the conference, but that's probably good for...
Or their division. Let's say their division. It makes it a little easier.
All right, and
We said
they'll win the division.
Yeah.
And I think that probably gets them best in the conference since, really the West is just a crapshoot.
Yeah.
But I don't know. They could be edged out by, I'm blanking on Pacific teams outside of Edmonton.
The Oilers will be highly touted, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what you guys think of the Ducks, but you would assume it'd be kind of the Ducks, Sharks, Kings.
I've made my thoughts on the Ducks well known on this podcast.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of mostly with you there. I don't. I think they have the team to win the division, and I think the division is there for the taking, especially because everyone feels like the Blackhawks step back pretty significantly this year. They kind of have cut their defense beyond to the bone, I think, and that's going to be a very real problem for them. They were a little more concerned with getting the winning band back together than they were actually fielding a better hockey team.
Their one bone on defense is Duncan Keith.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And Brent Seabrook is not as good as everyone thinks he is.
No, he's bad.
Yeah, and out west, I think if they win the division, I think they do have a pretty good shot to be the top seed in the West because that West, just like last year, is a total crapshoot. And not to say that the Central isn't, because the Central totally is too, but I feel like the Central is a slightly better crapshoot, maybe. And the Ducks are a very flawed team, and they're still coached by Randy Carlyle, for Christ's sake. And they won the division last year. And Edmonton, is as good as that team is, there's still a lot of questions about that team. I don't think everyone is in love with their defense. I think Cam Talbot is good, but I don't know how good he really is.
If they play him 73 games.
Right, exactly. I think there's a lot of questions out west. I think the Kings are all but cooked when it comes to that dynasty. And the Sharks are the Sharks, and Patrick Marleau is ancient, and they lost him, so that's not a huge deal, but it's something. It's certainly good. Yeah, exactly. They're the same position as the Kings. Their window is
done,
slammed shut, if not, open a very teeny tiny crack. So
I suppose they have Pavelski, Couture.
Yeah,
they have a handful of guys.
Still got Jumbo Joe, but yeah,
But in terms of players in their prime, yeah.
So I think, yeah.
And are the Flames like a dark horse threat, sort of?
The Flames, I don't get. I think they're very good defensively now, and they have very good pieces at forward, but it's all on, goaltending, and I can't even remember who their goaltender
Mike
is.
Smith.
Wow.
That's why.
That's why.
Yeah. It's the name. It's too common.
They had all those options available, and they
traded for Mike Smith.
So the basis of the argument then for the Wild playing well is that really their competition is not great, like in the West.
Right.
Like, there are good teams, but there's no reason why they couldn't rise.
Yeah, this isn't like the Metropolitan Division in the East, where you've got murderers row essentially in the Metro. So it's not going to be as tough maybe as people think. It's still going to be tough because I think the West is still a pretty physical conference, even all these years later after the NHL rule changes. But I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to. I don't know if I can predict them winning the division. I don't know if I feel comfortable doing that.
Would the Predators be the favorite, just given what they did last year?
They're up there. I've seen
so.
a lot of predictions that either have the Wild or the Predators winning.
Yeah.
And then the Jets still are kind of a young.
I think they're a very bubble team. I think a lot of it rests on how well Mason does, Steve Mason, because they could score in absolute bunches last year, but they couldn't stop anyone to save their lives. And Dallas is going to get some love, as Giles has pointed out. Ben Bishop is not impressing anybody, but he does have a little bit of a pedigree that he brings with him, probably better than Kari Lehtinen and Antti Niemi. So it'll be interesting to see. And then they added some people. They added Radulov. Who else? They added someone else too.
Mark Mathod.
Yeah, exactly. So they did add some good players to their team. So. And they have Hitchcock behind the bench again. So who knows what that means? Yeah,
They could be a threat to the Wild in the division, whether it's first, second, third.
Sure.
But it just seems like a team that is not built for the playoffs. Like, still.
Well, yeah. I mean, you can make the same argument with the Wild.
Yeah.
And I'd say if the Stars added a defenseman or two, maybe the trade deadline, they could definitely be a team that will scare you in the spring. But that's a long ways away. Yeah. So, how does everyone else predict the Wild are going to do?
I'm going to say second in the division. I'm going to say they...
Behind...
Ugh, it's a tough one.
Yeah. I'm really going to put you on the spot.
I should have done more research on this. I'm going to say second in the division behind... I'll go behind the Predators. I think they've got a lot of momentum. I think that team is young enough to where they can get a little bit better. They did add Nick Bonino, which is not like the biggest thing in the world, but couldn't hurt.
Gave them a little more depth at center, which they really needed in the Stanley Cup final after all their centers were gone.
All of their centers were slashed in the crotch.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the Predators. They had 94 points last year. They may be another team that's a threat in the playoffs. I don't know if they'll rack up the points like the Wild will. I mean, it feels weird putting them at number one, but I say that with the caveat of does not mean they're the team most prepared to win in the playoffs. I just think they can get the points just as the Capitals of yesteryear, as you're well aware.
Well, I think
did with Boudreau.
I think the Predators were a good example of you turn it on at the right time, and it doesn't matter where you finish in the regular season. Pittsburgh's done it the last 2 years, as I can fully write a book on how they just kind of buzzsaw through teams in the playoffs when you don't think they can.
And they'll have the advantage of being through it,
right.
last year, yeah.
And like I said, they did it, and they had a bunch of injuries kind of rack up as they kept going, and they were still able to take it to a Game 6.
What do you got?
I don't have them winning the division. I think, I don't know, maybe third in the division.
Ooh.
Behind who?
I just Nashville and maybe Chicago. And I don't know. I feel like with Chicago, everyone expects them to just take this step back and they've lost it. Maybe I feel like they're just gonna surprise people and be like, well, we're not done yet.
I mean, a lot of hockey is kind of how many times have you gone through it, right? Which is probably to the Wild's advantage as well. Yeah. Are you comfortable in these situations? Yeah. With the Wild, they go through a swoon. They're like, yep. We do this. We'll be fine.
We do.
We'll still make the playoffs. Don't worry.
And so, I think there is something to that 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 the Canes and the Taves of the world, there's no moment they haven't been in. There's nothing that's going to kind of rattle them. I mean, third seems right, even though I think they may be the third best team. They may just acquire a higher point total. Yeah. There just may be enough bad teams that what the Wild have to do is win games that they're supposed to. And if they do that, they can be one of the best teams, I believe, in the West. I think they are just more talented than a lot of the teams in the Western Conference.
Yeah. A lot deeper, certainly.
Yeah.
I have been full of negativity on this show, and I'm the only one in here who says they're going to win the division.
It's about balance. It's about balance, Giles.
Tables have flipped. Yeah. Come on, they got to add another banner to the XL Energy Center rafters.
No, I
The
said
one's getting lonely up
I
there.
think they'll win it. I just don't know if that means they're the best playoff team.
Well, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's fair.
I think mine's most accurate because it's soul crushing in the end, which is what I've come to expect out of everything.
You have to write a really bad movie script, and that's exactly how every Minnesota sports season is going to go.
I should just write a book on sports heartbreak.
The inverse of the Mighty Ducks trilogy formula.
So do the Wild swoon this year? I mean, do they go through their?
That's
last
later.
Last year they didn't go through it in their normal time, but they still did.
Yeah, we have that in our over-unders this year. That's kind of our joke, more of a joker over-under.
God, I wish it was an actual joke.
Can you bet on it? Like, there's no way that there's not a swoon
But
definition.
It's just for us because last year I think it was Pominville whiffs or something.
Over
under, and I never actually kept track of that.
I think I did for the first 2 updates that we did. I looked up how many shots he had that missed the net. Which isn't the same as whiffs.
Probably rolling pucks, though, with 99% of those.
Just failed to click, that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, before we dive into the over-unders, quick ad for our friends at Pick and Shovelware who are sponsoring the show today. As we've said the last couple weeks, you can go to pickandshovelware.com. If you so choose to buy anything that you like on the website, you can use the promo code Giles, Giles, for those who are unfamiliar with the spelling at home. And that'll get you free shipping. And then, as we have also mentioned, we are doing a giveaway in conjunction with them for our first 4 shows of the year, and this is episode 3. So go back to our first 2 shows to find the special password that you need to send in so you can win. Basically, we need all 4 in an email, and then we will draw the winner. It's a shirt, a beer koozie, and a hat.
Yes.
From Pick and Shovelware. And Ben, the password today is...
The password is and.
A-N-D.
It's actually the word and. The password is and.
I love how you just did that, by the way. That's great.
Yeah. Yep. So and is the password today. Go back and check out our first 2 shows again for the first 2 passwords. If you listen to this show a lot, you probably already know the 4th.
Yeah, we made it very on brand, so it's going to be blank, blank, and blank. And if you listen to the show at all, you
this season we're staying true to our brand.
Right.
Brands. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, we have many brands on this podcast. Yes.
The bingo chart has been filled out many times.
So no, again, pickandshovelware.com. Use the promo code Giles to get free shipping. Find them on Twitter at pickandshovelmn. Thanks to them for doing this with us. And yeah, next week will be the final week before we give some stuff away.
I still have to needle them about letting me design a shirt, but I don't know if that's going to fly or not. Now we can just design what says decent people, I think.
Oh, God.
Decent people with a picture of hockey gloves on the ice.
Oh, God.
All right. So we'll quickly wrap that up.
Don't let me go on any longer.
As our kind of one of our favorite segments to check back in, or at least Ben's favorite segment to check back in on last year. We did an over-unders at the beginning of last year, and we kept track of it. We did kind of quarterly updates during the regular season. Ben cleaned me out pretty good last year. So
that last show was so funny.
Let this be known as Giles' Revenge season.
The Giles Revenge Tour.
Unless we pick the same thing every time, which
is entirely possible.
We always seem to do.
I think the thing last year was that we didn't know what to expect from this team because Boudreau was just coming in and there was a lot of question marks. And
I was way too optimistic.
I was on the optimistic side, and you were on the underside most of the time.
And I don't remember.
Yeah, so
don't drink in podcasts.
Well, and to your point, I mean, a lot of players exceeded even our expectations because I felt like a lot of the over-unders that you set were really good, and that was the thing. So it was really hard to choose, and it's a kind of thing where you want to push on all of them. But I was a little more bullish than you were, and that just kind of caused me to run the table on you.
No pressure to set good over-unders again this year.
Yeah, the worse you set them, probably the better off you'll be.
I had to go into seclude myself in the dungeon and come up with these over-unders.
Sure.
All right, let's open up the envelope, and we find our first over-under at Minnesota Wild wins on the regular season. Bovada has them at 43.5, but we are not Las Vegas, folks. We are much better than that. Also, please don't bet on Las Vegas Golden Knight games, courtesy of Gary Bettman and Danny.
Don't do that. They put a team in Vegas, but don't bet on them.
No.
Don't bet on them, especially.
It's a family environment,
right? Especially after
Totally.
2 or 3 dozen casinos within a mile of the stadium. Please don't do that.
I set the over/under for this podcast on Minnesota Wild wins this year at 47.5. They had, I believe it was 49 wins last season, which was a team record, and also set a team record in points, which we'll get to in a minute. Ben, do they go over or do they go under?
Yeah, I feel like it's pretty easy to go over that Bovada number. We talked about it before the show, where Bovada is just like it's a big market versus small market thing based on how many bets they're going to get.
I'm not here to make it easy.
Right. We talked about how the Central kind of felt like it got a little bit weaker this offseason. At least the Blackhawks did, and other teams kind of stood still. And we didn't even mention Colorado, which is probably very fair.
No, that was correct. That was correct.
Yeah, that was very nice of them that we didn't bring them up.
They're going to take the division.
Yeah.
I think.
Oh my God, Giles!
We're all going to reconsider.
Saved by Wah. I think this over-under is really good. Again, I think you kind of nailed it. I'd want to do push. I'm going to go over very slightly. If I had to put a number on this season, I might say 48 wins. So I don't know they exceed the 50 mark, especially by a lot. But I think 48, 49 wins-ish is right around the range that we're looking for. So I'm gonna go over, even if it's slight.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with 50 wins for this team. And I look at what they did last year. They were at 49 wins. It's a little hard to guess just because you have to factor in potential overtime losses where they get points and obviously don't tally a win column. But Blackhawks had 50 last year to win the division. That seems kind of about right. And if I have them winning the division, I probably have to put them at a 50-win mark. So over the Giles, over under
the Giles line.
The Giles line.
I'm going with 45.
Ooh.
Just based
That's
on
probably,
on my already pessimistic prediction
that is good
that they're not going
to
to win the division and not going to finish second in the division.
It's also funny above the Bovada line for the Wild. Yeah.
I would definitely go above that, but still, what they had 49 last year. You said,
yes. Yep.
So, I think I don't know. I'm not feeling super confident about this team right now before we start the season, and I'm just kind of expecting that letdown phase a little bit. And maybe it won't happen. Maybe they'll rise to the occasion again and have another great regular season, which I think could still happen. I wouldn't be entirely surprised if that's the way it went either. But I feel like I'm more expecting a little bit of a letdown, and nothing drastic. I mean, 45 isn't too bad. I mean, maybe they'll get some more of those fun, shootout or overtime losses to get the loser points.
I try to keep my blood pressure down, but then the Wild play in a 3-on-3 overtime, and then it just goes right.
Hey, you
through
saw
the roof.
Granlund's goal last year, right?
Yeah, which was great.
Yeah,
but my blood pressure was still sky high.
At least it's not the Yo era where it's like the starting 3-on-3 is like Suter, Koivu, and Vanek.
Yeah,
it's like what?
Yeah,
what are you doing?
Well, you got to have Vanek.
Hey, Vanek, we started. We dropped the puck, Vanek.
Well,
Vanek, move.
Suter
move, Vanek.
Lead foot.
I'm as big of a Vanek fan as anyone, but he's not. And Koivu too. Like I really like
Thomas,
Koivu's
move.
game.
Thomas, we dropped the puck.
You might not find two slower players on the Wild at that time. So
I just want to put this out there. I was going around on YouTube today, cutting the intros and outros and whatever for the show, and I was going through the playoff game from 2014 against the Blackhawks, and the Wild had a playoff line of Danny Heatley, Kyle Brodziak,
God.
and Cody McCormick.
Danny Heatley.
Oh my God.
Danny Heatley.
Danny, we dropped the puck.
And they were
Danny.
generating scoring
Danny,
chances.
Danny, we dropped the puck. Go, move. Do you remember him breathing?
things,
Do you remember the
do
gulping
something.
thing that he did when he was breathing? He's a professional athlete.
Back in the day, before I had any Twitter followers, there was some construction going on outside or on West 7th, and I took a picture with a traffic cone. I had my arm around it, and I captioned it, "Hey guys, I found Danny Heatley outside," and it had like 1 like.
Yeah, well, I think Dion Phaneuf stole that bit where he's the human pylon, but that doesn't get as much play in this market, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys. You kind of pass the baton. You know, we had Danny Heatley.
It's just
we had,
amazing.
Thomas
but
Vanek.
the Wild trade for these players. That's the key there.
Yeah, that's the other part of it.
Danny, we dropped the puck. Go. Go, Danny.
Heatley did assist on the game-winning goal in Colorado.
Yes, it was a great pass.
It was a great pass to Nino.
He's like, I don't want this.
Right? No, I'm so drunk right now.
Oh God.
You rang? Okay, next on the list.
Did you go over or under?
I went over.
Okay.
Oh wait, I never said it.
Yeah, I don't think you did.
I went over.
Okay.
I wrote mine down right away, so I thought I already spoke. But no, I am taking the over on the wins because I'm all on the optimistic train. Actually, Derek, our guest last week, was first to start that train, so I have to properly credit him. So the next one on the list, Wild points. Bovada has it at 96.5. 96.5.
Wow, it's barely a playoff team.
But yeah, I think we would all hit the over very easily. So
I have a theory here. Remember, Boudreau has this line. He told Russo, like, everyone's against us. I don't see us in the playoffs. I don't think anyone's really written previews yet. I think this is Boudreau looking at the lines from Vegas. I really think that's what it is. I honest to God think that's where he came up with that theory.
His bookies calling him, "Hey Bruce."
Yeah. He's like, Mike, don't put this in the story,
Right.
I owe some money.
I hope he doesn't. I hope he doesn't have the same bookie as Vanek.
I think that guy must have hopefully got blackballed from sports.
Oh my God!
But no, yeah, he said that. He said in a NHL Network said we're not making the playoffs. I was like, what the hell show were you watching? I don't remember them saying that at all.
It was an NHL Network.
Yeah, this is a 106-point team. What angry Wild or angry Blackhawks podcast were you listening to where you heard that or something? Like, I don't understand where he gets that from because
except
as
from
down
Vegas.
as somebody could ever be on the Wild, I don't think they're going to say they're completely out of the playoffs.
Somebody did tweet me. I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but it was NHL Network Radio. Somebody predicted that the Wild would miss the playoffs.
There is someone in this room. I'm
Yeah.
just saying, there is someone in this room who maybe told me off the record that the Wild were not going to make the playoffs. Defend yourself.
Yeah, did you hear that somewhere?
I did.
Oh.
NHL Network. I mean, there's a chance.
Yeah.
There must be people.
There's
Yeah.
definitely a chance.
I don't know.
I'm not saying there isn't.
You don't. How do you keep making the playoffs every year and not doing anything? But again, then I step back and I'm like, okay, well, half the teams in the league make the playoffs, and if you have all these other teams that aren't performing well, I mean, you look at baseball this year with the American League and how it got to the point there. I think Brandon or somebody made a joke on Twitter like, well, you're above 500. Congrats, you're going to the postseason. Right. I mean, that's kind of what it turned into. So, I think there's a lot of that in play too.
It's sports today because even in the NL, there's 2 above 500 teams that will make the playoffs.
Yeah.
So.
And I guess I don't know. I would not be shocked at all. Like that, to me, I would feel like, okay, that was maybe a little expected if that happened.
It really goes back to what you said before. If these young guys really outperformed what they're actually capable of last year, then that is very possible.
Well, not only that, but we haven't. I think they're deep enough on the forward side where I don't think an injury really hurts them. I think they could be without Parise all season long and still make the playoffs. I think that's pretty easy. But I do think this team is one Dubnyk injury. Or one, I mean, definitely a Dubnyk injury. That wipes out the playoffs altogether. Or a Suter or Spurgeon injury. I think a Suter or Spurgeon injury puts this team's playoff chances in pretty grave danger if it's an extended injury.
Would you go as far as Niederreiter?
No, I mean, I love Nino as much as anybody, but I think there's just so much depth there. I mean, Parise, I think, is still maybe he's one of the best players. But I think they lose a forward, they're fine. They lose 2 forwards, it's getting borderline, but they're still fine. But they lose Spurgeon or Suter, and that's really rough. They lose Dubnyk, and it's like when Montreal lost Carey Price 2 years ago. Forget about it,
Yeah, I would agree with that too. I mean, that's the thing too. That's the ultimate wild card, is just not knowing what could or might happen with the injuries too with teams, which is
they've been fortunate.
Why predictions are so tough. But yeah, they have been really fortunate. I think I would definitely agree with that. Suter popped into my mind when you started talking about that, because he is just kind of this under. To me, I think he's a little bit under the radar sometimes with just how good he is and his abilities. And I think if he were to be out for a long period of time, I think that we definitely start to see how that would affect the team. So again, at the risk of being just super pessimistic, I mean, it's just it's really tough, because maybe I'm one of those people that looks at last year and just I don't see like, oh yeah, you can just keep going up. I think there's a big chance that you can fall a little bit. You have all these guys that played so well, and you had this great regular season, and is there really a guarantee that it's just going to continue at that level or above? I mean, I see a greater chance of it maybe going, the same or below.
Yeah, plateauing. So and I think with Suter, the last thing I'll say, I mean, he soaks up so many minutes. And that's why an injury to him would be. I mean, you're looking at giving Kyle Quincy 15 to 20 minutes a game, if not more. You're looking at giving. I mean, not that I don't like Gustav Olofsson, but he's so green.
A lot of pressure on
giving him 18 to 20 minutes a night is kind of a tall task. I think for a guy, Mike Riley too. There's so much offensive upside there, but there's so much defensive downside there. So that's my concern for that. And Spurgeon kind of along the same ilk. I think he's going to get almost similar minutes. So that's what scares me.
So this is kind of funny how this just kind of popped up into my Twitter feed here as we're discussing the Wild making the playoffs and whatnot. But moneypuck.com just put out their projections for this year, and they use a lot of analytical data from War on Ice and what have you to kind of make these projections. So looking at them here, the team that has the best percentage chance to make the playoffs in the NHL out of 31 teams this year is the Minnesota Wild at 73.8%.
I think Manny Elk from Corsica also had the Wild, I think, top 3 or something like that. So a lot of the models that
Dom at The Athletic, big on him too.
Even the nerdiest of stat nerds really like this team and its construction.
I think I really agree with what Tom said too, because when we were talking about it earlier, he said, well, they're like the Wolves, where Flips Wolves when they just made the playoffs every year and then they really didn't do much. Right. That comment also made a lot of sense to me too. Yeah. Where I could see that they'll make the playoffs, but they won't do anything. I think it's that part of it too. Like sure they'll get there, but do they have what it takes? Like you said, they don't have this pure goal scorer, which in my opinion they haven't had for a really long time
since Gabrick,
for years.
probably.
Yeah, since Gabrick, and I think that's been one of the key problems for a long time, and you kind of limp along with getting in these other guys and the Parise deal and everything, and you do what you can, but I think without that it really hinders your chances in the playoffs. But what you said about the comparison with the Timberwolves did make a lot of sense as well.
All right, before we quick go into points, I also going to point out here that the Wild have the second best odds on this table that I'm looking at to win the Cup, behind the Penguins.
Sure.
Didn't they have really good odds last year to win the Cup?
Yeah, they sure did.
I mean,
they sure did.
Listen. Nobody thought it was going to be Blues Nashville in the second round.
Everything looked good, and then Jake Allen. Anyway,
just add him to the list.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brick walls.
Wild.
Another brick on the wall.
Oof. Back to the over-unders. Wild points. Like I said, Bavada had him at 96.5. I thought that was way too low of a line, so I put them at the over/under of 106.5.
And I didn't pick the Wild to win the division. Now that I'm looking at these over/unders, I kind of think I should have, because I can pick them to have like certain win totals and certain point totals, but there's something about that stigma of winning the division that I just can't bring myself to say. I think they go over on this very slightly. I mean, I could. It's a really good over/under. I feel like I would have them from somewhere between 105 and 108 points. Last year they had 106, and I think, like I said, this team changed. but the core really didn't. So I'm going to say over. I'm going to be a little more optimistic. I'm going to say slightly over on this, 107, 108 points.
Just for perspective, the Blues had 99 points last year. The Predators 94. Right. So I understand why they set the line there. I'm going to say slightly under, but it's going to be like 105, 106. I still think you can win the division doing that.
Yeah.
I think they win the division more because the competition isn't as good. Sure. Less that they just blow everyone away.
I'm going 101, I think. Still getting 100, but not quite what they did last year.
I'm hitting the over.
Giles lives dangerously.
I'm a man on the edge.
This will be fun to look back in a few months and say
I'm
how
glad
long
we do
it
have
was.
a variety of takes here, which is important.
Yeah, we gotta. It's nice to branch out because Ben and I just rehash each other's takes and.
God, that last show was so funny.
With the over-unders last year?
It's like, Giles, stop drinking. It's too much. Giles.
No wonder why that poor bar and grill in Roseville went through a summer swoon.
They had their own swoon
they're like
during our podcast off season.
Do you get like welfare checks called on you from different bars?
Oh God!
Like, Giles, you haven't been in like a day. What's
everything okay?
You all right?
If you need a ride, like.
I thought I was doing well when I repaved the parking lot for them. But... Okay, next on the list, Mikhail Granlund points. Last year he had a nice amount of 69.
Nice.
Yes.
And I have set that at 63.5 this year, which I think, as Tom kind of pointed out earlier, he's probably going to come back down to earth a little bit. His shooting percentage was just through the roof, and will.
Do you think he's going to have 26 goals this year?
I
no
doubt
way,
it.
right? No way.
I don't.
I wouldn't say no way. I'm not saying I really expect him to follow it up.
Yeah.
But I think the move to wing for him was kind of a revelation.
Sure.
I think just it took some responsibilities off of him defensively, and it allowed him to be a little more creative. You think of the center as like the most creative playmaking position,
right? Yeah.
But really, you have so much less responsibilities defensively as a wing. You really are afforded a little more creativity, and also him being paired with Mikko. I mean, we saw them play together in the Worlds right after that season where Yo was fired, and just before the season, last year. And him and Mikko just have this Derek from The Athletic, our guest last week, actually wrote about it last week, where those two together are just dynamite. And there's obviously incredible amounts of chemistry there. So I don't know. I'm not going to say that I wholeheartedly expect him to be a 70-point player this season, but I don't know that he's that far off.
It doesn't. I guess it doesn't take much. Again, for perspective, Eric Stahl, 28 goals, 37 points, so 65. Yep. And then you had Koivu at 58, Niederreiter at 57, Coyle at 56. It drops off dramatically to 47 from there.
Yeah.
I look at it and I think Granlund's probably a 20 goal scorer, and then it's, do you get more assists playing on the wing? I understand. I really understand that argument. It makes a lot of sense. Why would you want a lot of defensive responsibility for a small player who has injury issues?
Yeah.
It doesn't make a lot of sense, but I like him at that position. I think he's a very productive player, even if he has 20 to 23 goals or something like that, and his point production drops off a little bit. Yeah. I still, at 65 is the over-under?
63.5.
63.5. I mean, I could see him at 65, 64, so I'd take the over just slightly.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at, too. I would take the over, and I would put it at 65, pretty much on the nuts, because it seems like, he's just, all of those things were so positive last year. And he did stay healthy, to your point. Yeah. Staying out of playing center kept him healthy, I feel like. I feel like he was, in spots in the ice where he could really kind of protect himself a little bit better, whereas as center, you kind of have to be all over the place, and that's where you end up getting run by Dustin Byfuglien and every other big player on the ice.
He didn't miss a game in 2015-16, and he didn't miss a game last year until he was held out for the last game of the regular season, just because Bruce Boudreau thought he was too important to sit out.
Well, he did break his hand,
which
there's
later
that.
revealed.
Yeah.
But I'm going to hit the over. I think goal scoring takes a step back, but I think assists go up. I think he hovers close to 50 assists.
You're setting up Heather for the captain negativity again.
No, it's really hard to go against the 69 because that's
Heather's determined.
it was so nice last year. I don't know if I'm going to be as negative on him as maybe the rest of the guy. I feel like last year was maybe the first year I really saw him just kind of figure it out.
Yeah.
I'll say 67 points. I mean,
Over.
I think he'll. I don't know if there's one guy that could be about the same. Maybe it would be him. I think I saw a lot of good things from him last year, and I don't see a lot of. I don't see a lot of difference maybe in what he's going to produce this year.
Sure.
Jason Zucker, contract year. He had, I should probably have this right in front of me as I start talking.
22 goals last year.
22 goals last year. And really at the end of last year, he clicked on that Koivu-Granlund line. And so I have set his over-under on goals this year at 24.5.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I feel like with the motivation of the contract here, that's kind of and if he gets to play with the Koivu-Granlund pairing, I think that's pretty attainable. But with Zucker, similar to Granlund, it's if he stays healthy, because he's been known to have a glass collarbone. So I don't know. I'm gonna go under, but I don't. I would literally say like a 24 under or like a 22 again. I think it's very fair to expect nearly and exactly the same season out of him as he had last year. I just don't know that he's going to take that next step to be a 25 to 30 goal scorer.
I mean, I guess one X factor here is that Matt Cullen, he connected well with Matt Cullen during their first stint, I believe. So it's possible that there's two lines there that where he could produce points if you have to shuffle the rest of the roster.
But I feel like Matt Cullen is very designated for the fourth line.
And that's not
Zucker
where you
down
want
there.
Zucker there. It's a really good line. I think there's a chance he has 25. I think it's stretching to say more than that. And I think it's more realistic to think. I think it's more likely he has 20 goals than 25. And I think he'll probably sit in that, 21, 22, 23 range. I think his speed is dangerous. It's something you have to account for. But I just don't see him becoming the volume goal scorer. So I'm going to go under.
I just don't think he's that good of a shooter.
There's a lot of times he just doesn't finish.
Yeah, he's got speed, but
he's not. It's weird. He's not a great power play player unless that changed towards the end of the year.
Not really.
Those are opportunities where you could score, and those, even if it's just 5 goals within a season, that's the difference between 25 and 30. So, I'd go under there for sure.
I'm going to go under with 20, probably. I think, you mentioned the speed. I think that's one of the first things I noticed about him and his play when, he came up a few years ago and really liked about it. But, that's the problem is he can't finish a lot of times. And I think I could definitely see him getting some more assists this year. But as far as the goals, I don't necessarily think he's going to improve there too much. And again, the injury risk is a big factor for him because that has been something that has just over his career now. It's been an issue. Some players it's like that, and it's you're not going to play hundreds and hundreds of games in a row. So I think that could be an issue for him too. But I'll go with 20.
Do it.
Over.
Positive.
He gets like 26.
Yeah, and I'm right on the borderline too. And the whole contract year thing is the kind of the interesting piece to it because there's, whether you like it or not, players seem to perform a little better sometimes.
Patrick
in a contract
Marleau had
season.
like 44 goals the year before.
Exactly. So and as much talk as there was about Zucker going to Vegas this last offseason, I think him really kind of adding that 25 plus goal mark to his belt would be a huge get for him as far as heading into contract negotiations.
So we come to the over-under, that carryover from last year, which has always been heavily debated on this podcast. And that is Devin Dubnyk games played. And last year he had, 63, I believe?
This is played or started?
Played.
Okay.
So this counts sub-ins.
For sure.
So I'm sorry, at 65. He started 63 games.
Okay.
So I have set the over-under with new backup goaltender, or old backup goaltender now, Alex Stalock, in mind at 61.5.
I almost have to go over.
I'm just going to start this discussion by saying, sorry, Gretchen.
Yeah. I have to go over. I think that they do a better job, and I think that, God, I really hope Stalock has a better season than Darcy Kemper had last year, and they're able to only start Dubnyk 60 games, which would be roughly the percentage you want. Yeah. But I also think, he's going to come in. I mean, even as few games as Kemper started on the stretch, Dubnyk still had to come in for 2 of them. So I feel like even if you only get 60 starts out of Dubnyk, which would be ideal, you're still going to get, and it's going to happen where Dubnyk's going to be pulled too, but you're going to get 2 or 3 games where he's going to have to relieve Alex Stalock. I'm still not that big of an Alex Stalock believer. I really hope that he takes this backup job and can be a competent enough backup to where, and I'll mention this when we get to our final category, but I really, really hope that he is the answer that the Wild are looking for, because I think was really kind of it was a key that a lot of people picked up on last season. That was kind of the problem with the Wild. So I'm going to say over. I really ever so slightly though.
I look at it this way: in most athletes at age 30, you know what you're getting. The funny thing is, we've learned with a lot of these guys, that's actually when these goalies kind of take off, right? Backstrom was kind of a late bloomer, and even Dubnyk had to go through the ringer a few times before he landed here. I guess the hope is, you're right, that it's only 60 for Dubnyk, but I don't see it. I think this is an easy over. I think it could be upwards of 65 plus for Devin Dubnyk. I mean, I know you don't want to stress the goalie out that much, but they know. We talked about how devastating an injury would be to him. They know that, they live and die with this guy. I know how controversial that contract was at the time, is looking pretty smart, given how important the goalie position is.
I never understood how controversial the contract was. I think the contract was controversial to people who just looked at the years.
Yeah,
and that
the
was
term. Yeah.
They looked at the term and they were like, oh my God, I can't believe we just gave a player who played a half a season 6 years. And there was a lot of articles written about it at the time where, that the way they front-loaded that contract was kind of brilliant. I mean, they can buy him out so easily after 4 seasons.
Yep.
And we're already almost on that. So it just...
And he's 31. He may be good through it.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a hell of a lot better than the contract that Carey Price got this summer.
As you read on Zone Coverage this last week.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean...
Read Zone Coverage.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I hopefully disagree with you, Tom, but we'll see.
I got to go with the over on this one, too. I think what they would want to do is play him less games in order to, not overplay him and, especially down the stretch if, they're in playoff contention, not, put too much pressure on him and tire him out. But I don't know if they're going to have that luxury just with the backup goalie situation. No. So I think it's, maybe 60, 64, I guess. Yeah, it's tough. I think it's maybe not what they want to do, but it's what they're going to end up doing.
The kicker for me is, I always think, okay, in a good October schedule where it is competently balanced.
What's that?
You could get more starts for your backup in there, but the problem is you get 4-5 days off in between games, so naturally you're going to come back with Dubnyk in those games.
Right.
But with that said, I'm going to take the under just to be that guy.
Good move, Giles.
And I think Alex Stalock has a bit of a revival as a backup.
Sure.
I know I'm certainly not big on him, as we've documented on this podcast, but I think, he seemingly has the confidence of Boudreau for right now, at least, assuming he doesn't, crap the bed.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm feeling optimistic, so I say under. Dubnyk I think he settles in at he'll just hit this under. It'll be 59.
Yeah. And I think an interesting thing, too, is the Wild didn't go to Stalock last year until the very, very end, until it was kind of an emergency deal where, I mean, holy crap, you needed to give Dubnyk a night off at that point. You really couldn't start Kemper anymore. So they gave Stalock I think it was 1 start was all it was, right? And so, but I think to that point this year, I'm not a massive Victor Svedberg fan or anything, but he had pretty decent numbers 2 seasons ago in Boston where, and we'll see. I mean, who knows? Maybe he's not as good as those numbers play out, but maybe he is this year's Alex Stalock, where if Stalock does end up faltering, maybe Svedberg having a little bit of any. I mean, he was Tuukka Rask's backup for almost an entire season 2 years ago and put up serviceable numbers. So hopefully, if Stalock does falter, they have that third option waiting in the wings like they had Stalock last year. And hopefully this time around, if they need to, they can go to it a little bit earlier than they did with Stalock last year.
So speaking of a goalie's best friend, second best friend behind the post is a defenseman who turns the puck over.
Goalies have no friends, Giles. DTA, don't trust anybody.
Which brings us to one Matt Dumba, who seemingly did nothing but turn the puck over if you follow the Wild game on Twitter.
Nice.
Another fella in a contract here.
Yeah.
And so I have set the over-under for points on Matt Dumba at 38.5, and he had 34 last year, which, if you dig deep into the Wild record books, that is the 10th best points in a season by a Wild defenseman.
Wow.
And he did it
11
at
goals.
Age of 22.
Yep. Yeah, and I kind of feel like this is going to go all this way, but you almost have to take the over with him, right? It just feels like he is on a trajectory where he's getting better, and it's noticeable how much he's getting better. And they've already kind of came out and said they're going to try to pair him with Suter as much as possible this year. And whereas last year he was paired with Scandella for much of the year, and we kind of know how that went. Scandella had a really rough year, and Dumba had kind of a so-so year from a advanced metric kind of standpoint, even though he had a decent amount of points. I think him being with Suter, if they can do that, which that's going to be the ultimate test, because Suter, being the grumpy Gus that he is, might throw a fit because he had the luxury of playing with Jared Spurgeon all last season. I mean, what more could you ask for?
Dumba? Do we know?
He's right-handed. Yeah,
you remember that?
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. Let's. As long as you don't pair him with Jonas Brodin, I think Ryan Suter's happy.
But no. Anyone who gets paired with Ryan Suter is good, because if you watched the preseason telecast last week, he's going to make the defense great again.
My God. I can't, yeah, they've done this multiple times during the season.
This isn't the first time they've done that, but they did that.
Why?
You're sighing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm stealing
all my bits. Do you have alcohol over there too?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, is he drunk too?
I came from a birthday party, but it was for a 13-year-old. So
yes.
So what?
But I think you have to take the over. I think you got to hope that he progresses at least a little bit. I hope the hope is he gets more power play time, and that would be the key. I mean, that's the key to getting him over 40 points a season, is getting him on the power play as much as possible. And as much as we love Ryan Suter, please keep him away from the power play if at all possible. Like, you want to limit his minutes? That's a great way to limit his minutes.
Yeah. I agree. I think the power play time is super important. I also look at it this way. He had 11 goals, 23 assists. Jared Spurgeon, who gets praise and should, he had 10 goals, 28 assists. You get a little more ice time. You're in opportunities where other players are scoring around you. In addition to him potentially scoring more, I'm going over here too. I think he's a high-risk, high-reward guy. I think these guys could pump in goals and also just do stupid things that cost you points in critical moments. So I hope he grows. He's only 22. You hope by the time he hits 24, 25, maybe some of those mistakes are out of his game. But I really think he's a capable scorer with a lot of upside.
I'm going to take the under just by a little bit. I mean, not, I don't think he's going to do a ton worse than the line or than last year, but
it's a 5-point jump. So that's reasonable.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if he's totally figured it out yet. So, I mean, I'm not sold on him being completely confident in, I'm not one of the freaks on Twitter that's all he does is turn the puck over. I'm
turnovers.
Like that. Yeah, that's all he does. No, I'm not like that. But yeah, I'll take the under on this by just a little bit.
That's fair.
This is the year of Dumba. And I wish his number was still 55, so I could say it's the
that
year
was a
of
big mistake.
Dumba 55.
Yeah, it was.
It was a big mistake.
Yeah.
Career-altering mistake.
I explained that to my girlfriend last night. She thought it was stupid.
Dumba
She
55
is
bit?
incorrect. She's incorrect.
She's from Iowa. Their sense of humor is weird. We already talked about that. She thinks Quad Cities being double the Twin Cities is funny, so...
She did buy me the new Wild jersey. So
okay, well then I'll forgive him.
It made up for it. No, this is the year of Matt Dumba. Taking the over, and in fact, I will go as far as saying, as I also mentioned on this, the Hockey Wilderness podcast, that he will lead the Wild defense in points this year over Ryan Suter. He only had 6 less than Suter last year. Suter only had 40 points, which I weirdly didn't notice till I looked this up last night. We all mentioned, everyone had career years last year, and then Suter just kind of floated in the weeds at 40 points.
The team is better if he's on the ice less. I mean, that's just true. Yeah.
But I'm just saying, if Dumba gets the time with Suter and then he gets more power play time, which I think he will, at such an easy over, and I am all about him leading the defense in points.
Yeah. Agreed.
There you go. Yule Eriksson Ek. One of 2 prospects we're highlighting in our over-unders this year. He is going to start the year seemingly as third-line center.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have set points for him this year this is just straight shooting from the hip, 35.5.
Mm-hmm.
Which, you think about, kind of ice time, and you look at the line mates, and you go, okay, even if he, kind of has rough patches, what can you decently expect from him in, a full 82-game season? So that kind of a fair spot to put that over-under at.
Yeah. I really hope I don't start a cascade trend here, but I'm gonna go under begrudgingly, because they talked about
boo this man.
They talked about projected lines, and they showed the projected lines. The third line was Foligno, Eriksson, Stewart. Yeah. It's like, this poor kid.
That's a power line right
I mean,
there.
granted, he's got enough size there that where nobody's ever going to breathe on him, but
kid, you're 20 years old, but here, we need you to carry our third line.
Here, why don't you drag 2 anchors down the ice at all times? And
it's okay. It's okay though. We have a great chiropractor.
No kidding.
But we don't have Vanek anymore. Otherwise, we'd put you with him.
He's dragging the stone. He's
Thomas,
dragging
we dropped the puck.
The stone of shame.
We're still paying Vanek.
We are. So I don't know. I really want to be optimistic about him, and I really like Eriksson. I'm not even down on him so much as more the situation that I see him getting into. I really hope that he does well, and I hope that he's up here the whole season, that he contributes, and I really hope he's a 40-point guy. I think there's too many pitfalls for him, being this first full season in the NHL, likely having some anchorish line mates like he's going to have. We all saw how good of a year Tyler Graovac had last year. I think Eriksson Ek is a lot better than Tyler Graovac, but if he's saddled with Chris Stewart or Marcus Foligno, I think that hurts his cause. And I think even if he scores 35 points on the under, that's still not a bad year. For a guy, he's a year older than Kunin, 20 years old. I think that's okay. I think that's okay that he does that. And, he also got the comfort that they can send him down if he's struggling and bring up Luke Kunin.
Or if you just want more ice time for him. Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So I think that there's a lot of variables there, so that's why I would take the under. But I still believe in him. I still want him to be more than a 30-point scorer. I think he can. I'm just not really bullish on him.
He had 7 points last year. And I think
in 15 games.
Yeah, in 15 games. I look at it this way. Eric Hall played 72 games last year at 26 points. I think he can do more than that. But I put him more at the 30 range, and so that would be under here.
Eric
taking shots at Hall.
Scored
You're lucky you're across the table from Giles.
He scored a goal tonight.
He did.
I has the sads.
I'm going with the under as well, shockingly enough. I think Ben made some good points, and he's still a young kid. I don't expect that he's just immediately gonna jump to stardom and start putting points on the board all over the place.
I'm hitting the over.
Good.
I keep going back to that play last year in Buffalo where he made a move around the defense and then he just made an absolute snipe from the face-off circle that he had no business scoring on. And he had a really good prospect camp this year. Boudreau loves him. I think he'll get put in spots to succeed. And, Boudreau does get the best out of players during the regular season. So I'm hitting the over.
Yeah, I really hope he does. I think that's a fair. I think the over/under was great again. So I really do hope he hits the over because I don't think that's too much to ask.
The other prospect, Luke Cunnin, who really had a great preseason, seemingly, as we record, almost played his way onto the roster out of training camp, and we kind of expected him to start in Iowa. And that could easily change. I'm sure it will tomorrow because we're recording today.
Yeah. That's usually how it works.
But yeah, news breaks
about
Monday.
12 hours after our podcast every time.
So I have set at games played on Luke Cunnin at 32.5 this year, which he could easily hit, but we don't know at this point where he's going to start the season, but I think he's going to kind of get floated back and forth between the NHL and the AHL. But
yeah,
what do I know?
I think it's a really good number. I think 32 is, if you were to pick a number out of a hat for him to play this year, I think 32 is, going to be a pretty popular choice. I'm going to go over, even though I don't think he plays more than 40 games here, or up. I certainly doesn't play more than 50. Even if he makes a team out of training camp, I think he still gets sent down at some point, regardless of how well he's doing. I just think there's some development time left there, and the jump from the NCAA, especially the dumpster fire that is the Big Ten in the NCAA, I think that's a tough jump. So I think Kunin gets like a cameo in the fall, and then probably is with the team, not trade deadline exactly, but sometime around there, January, February, I think sometime he latches onto the team. I think his flexibility, the fact that he can play wing and they're comfortable with him playing wing is a big part of that, because at some point they're going to get sick of Chris Stewart. And maybe even at some point they get kind of sick of Marcus Foligno if he doesn't really produce or isn't punching enough faces. I don't know. So I feel like his versatility is what's going to give him around the 40-game mark. So I'm going to take the over.
I look at it this way. I don't think Boudreau liked Strader. He had 37 games last year. Right. I don't think he liked Grayovac. He had 52.
Yeah.
30. Nate Prosser played 39 games last year.
Correct.
So I just got to think if this kid has anything. I know he's young and all that stuff, but he's going to be over that 32.5 mark, so I'm going to go over for him.
Yeah.
I'm taking the over as well for, you guys made good points, and just for the point, too, that, if this team has a couple injuries that go around, I think he's going to be maybe a guy that they rely on with, a lot more games, a lot more minutes.
Yeah, he very well could be the first guy called up from Iowa with any injury situation.
Definitely.
If Zach Parise was starting the year healthy, I would probably take the under here.
Sure.
Just because I think he's going to come in right around that mark. But because he's not, I think he's going to hit that over, especially if he... I'm kind of starting to believe the Wild are going to put Parise on LTIR just so they can accrue some cap space, at least to start the year.
And sign Jaromir Jagr.
Close. Yeah.
Correct move.
Sign Jagr.
Yeah.
God, that tweet. Nothing. Just when you think nothing can make your Saturday night any better, a perfectly placed photo of a cat holding liquor with 20s
covered in
that's Giles in another life. It really is.
Jagr and I would get along so well.
If his roommate didn't hate cats, Giles might have a cat like that.
Oh God!
Probably
with bottles of liquor and maybe some money, but
what a loss.
Ones, not 20s.
Or just a picture with bottles of liquor. I think.
Right.
Cat or no cat.
Yeah.
If my old cat could tell stories.
Jeez.
Anyway, so yeah, I hit the over. And then our last one is Swoons. And I have set the over-under at 0.5. So this is kind of fun, but it's also
It's not
do we
fun.
think there is a swoon? So basically, you take the under, you don't think there's a swoon. Take the over, there is a swoon.
Yeah, and it's tough to define what a swoon is, but I think we're very accustomed to it.
You know it when you see it.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like a recession where like they lose a couple of games, you're like, no, it's not happening yet, relax. And then like 15 games later, you're like, son of a bitch,
You know
that
what?
was a swoon.
I think we'll just have our friend Brian Reynolds on as our swoon consultant because he called it 3 games in last year, and everyone was like, "No, you're full of it," and then it happened.
It did.
So he's kind of like a hurricane expert.
We got to start naming swoons.
Oh my god.
That's actually a great idea. I like that idea.
Oh god.
Just stories of swoon Pierre developing off the coast of Lake Minnetonka.
There's your episode name.
Oh. So I've kind of been building to this, but I'm an idiot, but I feel
I'm an idiot, but
reusable soundbite.
I'm an idiot, but I'm going to say something you should listen to.
please take my opinion anyway. I think they avoid a swoon this year. I think for these reasons. Last year they played like crap out of the gate. Dubnyk saved them. That was kind of a swoon that was avoided more or less because they played like garbage. The swoon that actually happened in March, as much as I'd hate to say it as a goalie apologist, was almost 100% Dubnyk related. I mean, he had a horrific month of March. And a lot of people point to his overusage being the reason for that. The fact that Boudreau had clearly lost any confidence whatsoever in Kemper at that point. And he was throwing Dubnyk out there knowing that Dubnyk was struggling because Kemper was so much worse of an option. Again, I say that I'm an idiot because I don't trust Alex Stalock to be like a really good caliber. I don't think he's going to be the Scott Darling of this season, but I think that he could be just good enough to where they can give Dubnyk that kind of rest. And I think a well-rested Dubnyk is maybe the most important thing to avoiding a swoon. I could be wrong on that, and this team certainly, like we saw at the beginning of last season, played terrible while Dubnyk was good. But that was, maybe more to the fact that it was a brand new coach, new system, all that stuff. I think a well-rested Dubnyk is the key to avoiding a swoon. I think this year, I really, 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 really hope they'll have a more well-rested Dubnyk, and that way they can avoid the swoon for once in our goddamn lives.
We're gonna start naming them. I think it'll happen. I think it's part of the team's DNA. I hate to tell you, I hate to be the bearer of bad news there, but you know who the captain is. You know he's going to be here for a long time. It's not just
You're
on
blaming
him,
the
but
swoons on Miko.
I would say it's on the leadership group. And you look at one has a bad back, and one doesn't talk, and then one, just had a bad season 2 years ago. So I don't know. I think that it's kind of part of the DNA. I thought it would go away with Boudreau because it hasn't. I'm like the Weather Channel. I see it off in the distance.
He's already naming it.
Is your alternate Twitter account called Clarence Swamptown?
By the way, Swoon Clarence is the first name swoon. The first name swoon.
That's tremendous.
I think they definitely have a swoon this year again because it's the Wild.
It's tradition.
It's tradition. It's what they've done. And until they go through a season and don't have a swoon where they not just like lose a few games, I think, as we've all seen in the past, they don't just like go on a losing streak. They just completely jump off a cliff and just play horribly. There's, guys just like don't have any answers. They're like, I don't know. There's just no, it's almost like hopeless sometimes when, you hear what they say. It's like, God, I don't know how we're going to get out of this. And just, so I think for me, that's always been the frustrating thing. It's just the way they were losing games and the way they go into these swoons, and you kind of look at it and it's like, okay, well, how are you going to dig yourselves out of this? And, eventually they do, it's as much as it's in the minds of the fans, it's got to be in their minds too. That, especially if they go in and lose a game or play pretty poorly, it's like, well, are we going into our swoon guys? Or, because for them too, they know they've done it these past few years. Every year they go into it, and I don't know what it's going to take to get out of it, but I mean, I think they do. So,
when you talk about the fans, I'm just imagining like some old guy sitting on a rocking chair on his porch. Just
I remember Swoon.
It's swoon season. I can feel it in my bones.
Brian Reynolds.
Swoon coming. Yeah, that's Brian Reynolds. He's sitting in a rocking chair. Swoon, I can feel it in my bones.
Oh, God.
Well, it would be not true to how I've been picking these if I took an over here. So I'm going to say no swoon, just because I don't think my liver can handle another swoon. I'm sure Bar Grill in Roseville would like another swoon.
Oh, they're going to, yeah. As soon as the swoon hits, they're going to shut down their 2-for-1s.
It's 1 for 2s.
They're hoping for an early swoon season this year.
Oh, tremendous.
No swoons this year. I think, I think it's weird to say, like, Boudreau maybe learned a little something about himself last year, but he really didn't kind of have an answer for the swoon last year. He really didn't, which is weird to think of a head coach who's had that much success in the regular season.
But in fairness to these guys having a swoon, Boudreau has had swoons with good teams. I mean, his swoon got him fired in Washington.
His swoons come in April.
Brutal. Or early May. That's around where the second round is. So
with the Game 7s,
Yeah,
the Game 7 was not an
swoons.
issue last year, and that's what everyone was fixated on before the playoffs. And it's like, oh well, I guess you,
Game 7 is another
didn't even
team's
get
problem.
Yeah, so he had swoon in Washington. That, I mean, it was the fact that he couldn't get past the second round, and then they had a swoon to start a season, and he got fired in Washington. But then his last season in Anaheim, if you remember, they started horribly.
Yeah.
They
yeah,
still ended up
right.
winning the division, but they started they were shooting like 3% or something absurd like that. They started a season with like a 6-week swoon almost. I mean, it was to the point where he was on the hot seat from, day 3 all the way through the season, basically, until they ended up winning the division. But he's not unfamiliar to swoons, even with different franchises. So, to your guys' credit, it's certainly not just a Minnesota Wild characteristic, but Boudreau has also endured them as well. I think a lot of teams do. I think we feel it here because it happens every season. But I think there's other teams where it happens to them once in a while too, and it's just kind of a thing. It just so happens that here it happens every year, where we're like the tornado alley of swoons.
It just becomes very panicky. Very panicky.
So that's all we have for the over-unders. If Tom is ready over there on the soundboard, I think we can hit that Bruce Boudreau quote of the week.
Yeah, let's do that.
Hi, this is Bruce Boudreau. I don't see how in Toronto that they're calling it, unless it's a guy they just pulled in off the street that hasn't seen hockey before. If I were the fans, I'd be booing even more, because they pay good money for this.
If you want it, don't just think you want it. Go out and f***ing want it.
So I did not think we were going to have a Bruce Boudreau quote of the week because he was away from the team.
Yeah.
Obviously, condolences to him, the death of his brother. But he did come back for yesterday's game against Dallas, and I believe he got back for the game against Kansas City.
He was. He was in Kansas City.
And so he was back last night, and after the game, he was asked, this was tweeted out by Michael Russo, on if the Wild could afford to keep both Luke Kunin and Joel Eriksson on the roster together, because obviously the Wild are just so crunched to the cap. And his reply was, "Listen, I failed math in grade 2."
It's so good. and probably true.
Now, this is a guy who was a very highly touted hockey prospect until he got into like an altercation at a Toronto bar, and that caused his draft stock to slip.
I mean, he is worth a 30 for 30, I think.
Oh,
like,
God,
if you have
yeah.
all this old stuff.
Yeah, I think if you're going to make one about an NHL coach, I think he's...
Can you imagine being his classmate? Like, he did not care about school if he was a top-ranked guy, and probably just crack jokes the whole time.
Yeah.
It'd be so amazing. Like, he is stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
Good grief.
Yeah. So that's what we have for this week. God, this is going to be a good segment. We only have so much time with Boudreau and getting all of this in.
It's really the
going to
gift
be
that keeps
good.
on
Yeah,
giving.
Well, that's the thing I said when we kind of came up with this in the offseason. Is like he's got at least something that makes me go, he is the best.
Yeah.
At least once a week, if not more.
Right.
That's why it's going to get difficult. We're probably going to have many quotes we have to cram in this segment.
Boudreau quotes of the week.
Yeah.
I want, and so I just dreamed this up in my head. I want a hockey game called by Doc Emmerich with Bruce Boudreau on color.
Oh my God!
Wait, and Ilya Bryzgalov between the benches.
Oh my God!
I want that.
There's your dream.
Just a man, like a Winter Classic or something, just like a grandiose event, or even playoffs, because Boudreau might not be there. But just like
third round.
Because the Winter Classic won't be here, by the way.
Right, of course not.
Yeah.
But God, just could you imagine? Because I mean, he obviously have incredible insight, and you couldn't really match his insight. But his, and who knows what kind of chemistry he might have with Emmerich. But Emmerich is so good, it doesn't matter. He has chemistry with everybody.
Well,
but
we're about to find out with Milbury, aren't we?
Oh God, no! I forgot all about that.
I was happy.
But yeah, God, just imagine that. Imagine, Boudreau commenting on every play. Imagine Ilya Bryzgalov interviewing players during the game and just like word vomiting out his observations from ice level.
I can see it now. In between the benches, we go to Bryzgalov. Here with Suits. Why you mad?
Some professor would like transcribe this and just be like, "We're back in the Neanderthal days."
Right.
This brought us back a while.
Well, could you imagine like a first time viewer of hockey watching that game?
Yeah, they'd literally be like,
with these people.
Either everyone's drinking,
yeah, right,
or concussions are very real. It'd be bad.
And poor Doc would probably just be like wetting himself the entire time. It would be very. I mean, he would still do it because he's a pro and he's one of the best. But
yeah,
it would be. I think it would be a blast for him, but it would also be very challenging.
He would be
for
like
him to hold himself together that whole.
It'd be
game.
like Billy Madison, where he's like, "You made everybody dumber."
Oh, incredible!
All right, on to jerseys.
Team USA? Oh, yes, it is. They've got on new uniforms. They're wearing the logo of the Duck. I've never seen this before.
Quack, 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 quack.
I love that.
I know.
I think I say that every time now.
Yeah, indeed.
It's nice.
It's fun when they go through in the locker room and say all, where they're from.
The locations,
too.
Yeah.
Little shouts out to Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
So the jersey of the week this week, again, if you didn't quite make it to that portion of the podcast last week, I certainly don't blame you,
Yes.
and I apologize again. But we are kind of imagining or trying to create third jerseys for every team next year as part of the Adidas switch, which is taking place this year.
Mm-hmm.
And this week's team, is the Carolina Hurricanes. Usually you throw a black uniform in here as the third. This is going on Facebook, isn't it?
It is. Keep going.
I wish I could find a different color than black, but it's probably going to be some kind of variation of their black jersey. And I guess maybe just keep it, simple like your old uniforms were. Just black with the Hurricane logo, or I'm sorry, Swoon logo.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think the Hurricanes are kind of caught in like the doldrums of hockey logo and hockey aesthetics because there just isn't a way to make that team look good. I feel like I
just got a Facebook notification.
I feel like they need something different. They need to go with, they need to come up with a logo that kind of freshens things up a little bit, because as good as their logo is, as much as it looks like a hurricane or whatever, I don't know. I feel like they need to go with something else, and I don't know exactly what that is. I know Cam Ward used Pirates a lot, and that's a big thing on the Carolina coast. I don't know if that's an option because that could get a little corny, but something to that effect. I would just like to see something like that.
You know what? You know who had a good jersey?
The Hartford
Whalers. Also, isn't this team like in financial ruin? It's ridiculous. I actually like the Hurricane, and I think that probably the simpler the better. I mean, you really just kind of red and the logo is fine, and I think you could do away with the flag. I know what they were trying to do there, but it kind of doesn't work.
This is fun. I'm watching this in a very delayed feed.
So am I just supposed to say like I hate it, I like it,
you can
hot take.
Hot take.
You could say make them give them the Nordiques jersey since they're going to be there in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, that works too. I mean, I don't know. I've never really had an issue with them. I thought they were, obviously it's different because it's not, you don't have Nordy as your mascot or anything. You don't have, you don't have an animal as your mascot. So it's different just by being, the Hurricanes. So
sure.
I mean, I think it's cool to just, just keep it simple.
Sure.
All right, that can do it for jerseys and the Facebook Live portion of the podcast. Hey, plug for our Facebook page.
Yes.
At GATG Wild Podcast. Or excuse me, Facebook.com/GATG Wild Podcast. We post all our stuff there. Please like our page.
It's worth it just for the jersey segment.
Mm-hmm. You will not find any NFL protest news on our Facebook page, unlike most everyone else's Facebook page.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Things that make Giles sigh.
All right, last thing before we depart is our weekly wager segment.
The weekly wager.
That's what you gave me?
I spent a lot of money on making that drop, as you might imagine. That was...
I hit it and I was like, is this right?
Yeah,
this is right.
That's right. I really need to work on. Do we have some kind of department that we can have make stuff for us like that?
Yes, yes. Okay. I should.
Me,
we're at a radio station. We should be able to do that.
I mean, I did make 2 opens on the spot this morning for this podcast.
That's true, yeah. No, and that's what I made that on the spot 2 weeks ago, but obviously much lower quality than your opens. I don't have fancy software for that, so.
I use the software that I downloaded to try to record our podcasts onto, but since I can't get that to work, we still use the phone.
This is inside podcasting.
Yeah, no kidding.
Which is now why we're in the studio.
Exactly.
When Tom calls and says you're in the studio from now on.
Yeah. No, that's fair. After last week, good Lord.
We can't have you outside.
Giles, you've had too many beers on the podcast. You're indoors now. Oh. Did we have a weekly wager? Do you want to make a weekly wager?
Well, I think, since you took the Yankees to win, and I believed in the Twins to win, clearly you're just siding with your girlfriend, but...
she's going to hear this.
She actually listens?
Yes.
Why would she do that?
I don't know.
Oh, poor thing. So yeah, now we need to come up with stipulations on said wagers. If I got the Twins, you got the Yankees. What are we doing here?
I don't know.
Mani-pedis?
Oh,
God. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Heather's face on that was Facebook Live worthy.
Nobody wants to see that.
She was it was disappointment.
All right, how about
that's rough.
How about Twitter Abby for a week of each other's choosing?
Oh my God.
I think is that good? Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay.
Jamel Hill.
What? I don't even know where to go with that one, to be honest.
You're just going to make my avatar like coleslaw.
I literally thought that 15 seconds before you said it.
Could be bunch of liquor bottles, but that wouldn't be very interesting.
Yeah, no,
make it the cat. Make it the cat.
Yeah, that would be
the Yager cat.
That would be a favor to him. I don't know if I want to do that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's a pretty cool Abby. I got to be fair.
Yeah, with the liquor bottle. I mean, then it wouldn't be that, people would see it and be like, oh, okay, sure. Yeah.
Right.
Like, there's nothing weird about that.
Yeah, I should change it right now, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
All right, so that's fair.
Yeah, there you go. There's our weekly wager, and it is not even hockey related.
Well, they're not going to be. We already got the one we have on the board is for the Timberwolves. So we're just kind of. He thinks they're not going to make the playoffs.
I mean, there's a chance.
But there is, and that's why it's a decent wager.
Sports.
Jump on the bandwagon, Tom.
No, I think they're a 50-win team, but
yeah,
no, Tom.
Sorry.
But the problem is, Tom, is a 50-win team good enough to even win in the West? Like, good
no.
Lord,
They'll be an underseed
insane.
probably. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's so insane. But no, I think we'll be more nonsense on the end of the wagers than anything. But that's probably a good thing. Just a little non-hockey outlet for us to continue to needle each other all season long.
All right. That can probably wrap up our lengthy season preview edition of the show.
The zone coverage roundtable season preview.
Yeah, no, it was fun. We'll obviously have Tom and Heather back again as their two of our more frequent recurring guests.
Yeah, Heather's like maybe.
Actually,
maybe. That's a hard maybe.
Actually, Heather might have the same number of appearances as Nate Wells now. I could be wrong.
Because
you forgot one.
Yeah, I did. I shorted her one when I sent out a tweet this summer.
Yeah, that was not cool.
Yeah, sorry about. Well, there's been so many meltdowns, and
could you be any more rude?
Nate has been in a lot, though. I think she's just behind Nate. Tom has got the lead because he keeps forcing himself into our studio.
Correct.
Well, once we signed the paper that said we're part of zone coverage,
that was the sole reason.
We didn't get a choice anymore, so. No, but I think Tom's number one with a bullet. Nate Wells is second. I think Heather is very close third behind our Joey Bishop, Nate Wells.
And we'll have him back again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Tom will want to come on during Swoon season. And
oh yeah, do I get to name it?
Well, we already came up with some names. We had Swoon Clarence and Swoon Pierre.
And we hardly talked about Friends today, so I definitely have to come back.
Well, you need to get a review from Giles when he goes to see the Friends set.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yes.
In LA, so.
Yeah, because you'll get to see the cool one. I got to see the Barbados hotel rooms because I went there when they were still filming the show, and I didn't get to see the cool stuff.
Oh.
But it was still. I got to see the ambulance bay for ER, which was also really cool because that's another one of my favorite shows.
Did they just throw the Central Perk stuff all in a closet during that time, or what happened? I don't get
I can't remember. Well, because there was only so much room on the set, so they switch out the sets somehow. I think is what happened. So they weren't using the regular ones for their season finale in Barbados. So I don't know where the other ones went. I guess, but those were the main ones on the stage. So
because you would think the apartments and Central Perk would be the three that they would have up at all times.
I think one of them, the outside of Central Perk might have been off to the side, I think. But the main one we were looking at was, I think, the ping pong table when Monica and Mike had the ping pong match back and forth because it was raining the whole time in Barbados. So
it's the humidity. All right. No, that can wrap it up. Heather, where can people find you and your written work?
Well, on Twitter, I'm at HL Rule, and I'm at a lot of places. So
zone coverage above all else.
Yeah. Well, of
zone
course.
coverage above all else.
That goes without saying. Zone coverage, and the Twins Twitter, and a bunch of places. I mean, high school sports probably will be starting up, so I'll be with the Star Tribune again and Sports Engine, and
for sure
in demand.
I guess so.
It's kind of a big deal.
Yeah,
kind of a big deal. We're lucky we have her on the podcast.
It's true. Yeah, it's a good get.
Tom, where can people find you?
I have all the good opinions. Nothing controversial. It's at Schreier3 on Twitter. And zonecoverage.com, which should be bookmarked in your homepage.
Now, are you going to cover, because we hired the great Tim Fakeless to cover the Wolves this year.
Yeah, he'll be the main Wolves guy. I'll do some Wolves.
Still do a little bit with them?
I will do the Wild if I don't feel threatened. I think that's my thing. Heather, if you want to do some Wild games, go ahead. They don't threaten you. They like you. They like you?
I have heard no threats so
You have
far,
gotten no
so,
threats. I think I almost said his name. Somebody there, very sick man, might throw me.
Come on,
throw me over the press box and into the stands. But no, no. If I feel unthreatened, I will show up and do some coverage for the Wild.
Can Heather push in a catering cart and you can hide under it?
I think that's the play. Are you down?
Yeah, that might have to work.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should do it.
I just so close.
Giles is wishing he was drunk right now.
Yeah, as if the drive back from Iowa wasn't bad enough, Giles.
I actually enjoy it. Weirdly, I don't know. That's just me.
Okay.
But thankfully, I have a liquor cabinet I can go home to now.
Yeah, you're very close.
You can find Ben on Twitter at Ben Remington. You can find him writing at zonecoverage.com/wild when his travel permits. He's basically a Phoenix resident right now, so get ready for your hot Arizona Coyotes takes.
I'm gonna hang out with the Matthews family.
Yeah.
There you go.
I wonder if I can get in the press box there. I probably have a better shot.
Hey,
getting in the press box.
Maybe
Can you imagine if they I walk in and they're like, we know who you are.
Maybe you'll run by Wayne Gretzky at some point because he lives out there.
Oh yeah, me and him can play some bets.
Yeah.
There
you and Panic?
No, Gretzky.
Oh.
It was his wife actually with the whole betting scandal.
That's right.
Anyway, you can find me on Twitter at Giles Farrell. Please follow our podcast Twitter at GATG Wild Podcast. We do mailbags and fun stuff like that on Twitter. So follow us there and ask your questions. If you like the mailbag segment, which will come back when we don't have guests.
Right.
Facebook, follow us there. I
think that's about it.
I think I got it all. I think we've plugged zone coverage enough to where people should know that website by now.
Yeah.
Zonecoverage.com.
I think we got it.
So yeah, we will be back next week. And before I forget, I almost did forget. We do have a special tribute to Dave Strader, the Stars broadcaster who passed away this morning. Certainly one of my favorite broadcasters in hockey. And he had obviously passed away from a battle with bile duct cancer, which wasn't even a year that after that had been announced.
Exactly,
So that obviously not a good day for hockey. So that is how we are going out in this podcast. So we will catch you next week.
Later.
Face-off is right at the center ice, down on the Wild, control a pass ahead. Parisi deflects. Gapanoville back to Graham, back, and he scores! What a beautiful play! 2-0 Wild!
I marked all the spots.
Now it comes back to Suter again. Moves it along for Pominville, back to the line. Hit the goal post, rebound, Parisi scores! It's just over 7 minutes gone by in the second. Niederreiter with a shot. Score! Nino Niederreiter! Suter straight away. Hands it off now for Koivu. Top of the circle, far side. Well set up, they score! Jared Spurgeon!
I fight the battle every day, and I find inspiration from many different sources every day. I love you all, and I'll see you very soon.